Alright, today we're going to be taking a look at the command line tutorial program that I showed yesterday. If you did not see that video, make sure you take a look. I will link it in the cards as well as in the description. Basically, this is just a program that teaches you how to use the command line. So today we're going to talk about how it's written and how it works, and we're going to go through all the code. So over here I'm just in VS Code, and we're going to go in chronological order. So basically the way it works is we have a main file, which is right here, that interfaces everything, but we're not even going to get into that yet. So the first things that were written were this directory class and this file class. So both are in a package called file system, and so they represent these two parts of a file system, and it's very basic. So a file only has a name and then the contents, which is a string, so nothing fancy, no permissions, nothing like that. And then with the directory, it's pretty similar. The only difference is it has a container, which is a reference to wherever it is. So say this directory lives in the /home directory, the container would represent that. And that's something for later in the video for why we use that. But the main difference here is the contents for the directory is an actual list. Now, there's no doubt that there were better ways to go about this, but I wanted it to be the most simple way so that if anybody wanted to read the code and understand how it works, they could. So let's just quickly go through both of these classes. File is very simple. If you're familiar with Python, this will make a lot of sense to you. Basically, we just have the constructor, which you can assign the name and the contents, and then we have a few methods in here. So append just takes an argument that's text, and then it will add it on to the contents. Write just overwrites the text, and read returns the text. So if you want to read whatever's in there. So pretty simple file class. You can look more into this if you're interested. Directory is more complicated. So I'm going to briefly go over directory just because I don't want it to take up too much time. And a lot of the things, it's common sense. The code isn't amazing, but you could definitely read through it. So I'm just going to quickly go through it. We need a few things here. So of course, we need copy in order to make deep copies. I'm going to get into that more later. And then also there is a colors class, which I don't even need to show. I got it online. Basically, it allows you to add colored text to the terminal. So directory needs that in order to do ls, so it's actually colored output. And then two different files. Of course, it needs file, which is what I just showed you, because the directory may contain different files. And then variables right here, which I'm actually going to show. This is something that I wanted everything to be able to access, so it doesn't actually import anything really except for colors, so that everybody can access it. Every file without having an issue with circular importing, but it just contains various things like if the shell is root, if we're doing a color prompt, but nothing too fancy. So we create the class, and then we have a constructor that basically just takes in the name and then the container. So the container I touched on briefly before, and now we're going to go over a couple of these, but not everything. It's pretty well commented, so if you want to check it out yourself. Index basically finds whatever you're interested in within the contents. It looks in there. Add is to add something to the contents. Get is to retrieve something from the contents. Has sub tells you if whatever you're looking at has at least one subdirectory. And get sub is actually used a lot, so I will go through get sub a little bit. But basically what it does, if you don't know how paths work in a terminal, I'll show you real quick. But basically we might be looking at a directory like /home, /user, something like that. And maybe on the user's desktop, we have a file called file, right? So it's denoted by slashes each directory. And so basically the way that this works is it looks for slashes, and then it uses, it's almost like recursion, but it's not recursion. And if you don't understand this, it'll make a lot more sense if you read through it slowly on your own. But basically, say we're in home, right? Now we run get sub on home, and we want to find user desktop file. So then it'll go into user, and then it'll say, all right, we found user. What's the next thing we're trying to find? Desktop. So it'll go into desktop and it'll say, all right, we found desktop. What's the next thing we're trying to find? So it'll find file, and that's it, right? There's nothing else that it actually needs to find because that's the destination. So that's what it returns. So that one's a little complicated. It definitely took some time, but get sub, that's really important. You'll see we use it a lot later on. Get path is just to get, like if you do pwd, print working directory, you need to see the path that you're in. So whatever folder and subfolders you're in. And that one took me way too much thinking than it should have. And basically I just ended up using container and almost like doing a bunch of cd dots and then checking out what directory I was in. Get container, nothing really revolutionary here. This deletes something, this copies everything. And then we have different shell commands. So of course we have ls, and this is why we needed the colors library. So this will actually list all the contents and whatnot. mkdir, of course, I'm not going to go over each one of these, but it's basically every one of the shell commands that are implemented that actually involve the directories. So you can see we have a bunch in here. A lot of stuff there. And so that's the basis of all of this, right? And now let's check out levels. So we have just one level class, and this one's super straightforward. So you'll be able to understand this, no doubt. And really the only thing it needs here is function, and I'll quickly show you functions. It's not that fancy. This makes sure that something's in bash history. This clears the screen. This is something I got on Geeks for Geeks because I wanted to be able to type clear. And level is just a way that we hold the instructions, the help message, and however we have to check to see if the level is completed. So it's just an organization thing. And so we have the constructor here, and then we have has members, so basically if it exists. And then instruct prints out the instructions, help prints out the help message, and check just wants to see if you've completed successfully. That might be a little strange to grasp, but I'll show you each level is defined right here. So here we have levels, and this is a tuple that just contains all the different levels. You'll see it's really poorly structured, but it doesn't need to be anything fancy. So we have level 1, and we just invoke the constructor, and the first argument was the instructions. So you can see here, I'm pointing, but you can't see my finger. So we have the actual instructions that'll show, and then we have a comma, the help message, which is the second argument, and then the tuple, which is actually what we're checking to see if it was completed. There's not much more to that. It's not amazingly structured, but it works well. So then we're going to get on to the next thing, and that is the parser. So there are two different files that we have here. I'm going to go over commands first. Commands is one of the biggest files, and basically it handles all the commands that you input. So we have is banned, that's just to make sure a command isn't banned. So we wanted to say if you tried to do rm-rf/, if you don't know, that basically deletes everything on Unix-like systems. And of course it wouldn't do anything here because it's not a real terminal, but we just wanted to discourage that. So nothing too fancy there. Game process, this is a big one. So this basically handles every command that is for the game. So if you've played the game, you've seen you do level instruct, level help, level check. This actually wants to see if you're executing a command that the game needs to handle, or if you're executing a command that the file system needs to handle. So this all does that. And then down here we have special commands. And special commands are silly things like yes, which just prints y. There's a real reason for that, but it's besides the point. Clear, which then executes the clear function. And then sudo su, which of course there's no real root here because we're not in an actual shell, but it elevates it to root and it changes the username. And then who am I, stuff like that, history, exit, stuff that isn't found in the file system. So interchange is one that I didn't really use much, and this is really poor implementation. If you understand what this is, it was not the best solution, and I plan to fix it in the future. But just a simple thing I have here is I replace $?? with the last exit code. If you're not familiar with bash, $? will return the last exit codes. And then an asterisk is a wild card. So here, I'm not even gonna get into this. That was not the best way around it. And then here we have all the file system commands. So this actually looks at the command you're running. So here mkdir, and then it looks for the tokens that you might be inputting, like verbose or just the different arguments you're commanding. So we saw a lot of this before, and it basically just calls everything onto the directory. So as you saw before, we implemented these into the directory. You can see here, this is a directory, and we're calling rmdir. So this is just for modularity reasons, and there isn't a whole lot more to this. Here's something kind of funny. I wanted to do Vim, but I couldn't find a way to really implement real Vim, so instead I made my own thing called edit, which was just, oh boy, which was just the computer asking for user input, and then you'll see here, sys.standardin.read, that's all it does. So nothing fancy, but that's just for text editing. That's really it for commands. And then interpreter was a big one. This one isn't all that complicated, or rather it's not all that verbose, but it is quite complicated. So it does have a constructor, it is technically a class, and this was just for modularity reasons in case I wanted to use this in the future. But basically the interpreter has a default head directory of just slash, so also not the best way around it, but that's how we did it. So it saves the working directory. So if you do cd something else, it'll change the working directory. And then the dir tree just saves, so I'll show you right here. I'll tap it out real quick. So say we're in desktop. So we're right here, home user desktop. The dir tree would look like this. So I'm not gonna put quotes or anything because these would technically be directories, but we'd have a directory home, user, desktop. And that would be our dir tree. I don't recall if I actually implemented it. I believe I did, but not entirely sure. Command is the current command, and then token is the broken up ones. Prompt just asks you for the command that you're actually inputting, so it prints out the PS1 and whatnot. If you don't know, the PS1 is the prompt, so this is my PS1 set right here. I don't actually use that, but it's just for clarity reasons. Process takes the command, it processes it, and it runs all the stuff we looked at before, like interchange. It runs it through game process, through special, is banned, file system. So it basically runs the command wherever it is. And there's really not a whole lot more to it. I can show you the main file, but the reality is the main file is just to tie everything together. So here we just have all the imports because we end up using all the files that we wrote. And then we make the interpreter. This is just an instance of it. It doesn't need any arguments. And then here we make a couple of things. So if you've played the game, you've seen that there are a couple pre-made directories. And the reason the way that we did that was just executing the commands like this. So nothing fancy there. And then here we just make sure that the color prompt works, and then we just have a big while loop. So yeah, there's really not a whole lot more to it. I highly encourage that you check this out, mess with it, see if you can improve it, anything you want. If you have any questions, as always, leave them down below. I'll be sure to get to them. I had a blast writing this. I really hope you guys learn a lot from it. I hope that it helps you, because that was my goal here. I love using the command line, and I want to share that with other people. So let me know if you have any questions, anything on the command line, anything about the program, and I'll be sure to get to them. So thank you for watching, and be safe.